All right, we're ready to go live here for the Panther-Lair Show on a Wednesday night. I apologize for starting about 2 minutes late. I mean, I think we always start a couple minutes late. We're never exactly on time, right at 8:30. Sometimes there's this or that you would think I would just be sitting here ready to go. 25 after, I'd just be sitting here ready to push waiting to push the go live button and just get started. But there's always something going on. I was trying to hold out and see if one or two more text messages got responded to or direct messages got answered or something like that. Because there's always, like this time of year especially, there's always like 10, maybe not 10, sometimes 10 outstanding direct messages or text messages waiting for answers that'll provide crucial clues to what's happening in the world of recruiting. I joke about this often. I've got my legal pad here, and this is just page after page of Pitt information and speculation and sometimes games. Here's the Pitt Northwestern game. Kind of kept notes on that one as it was happening. This is just sort of the weekly plan from a week ago. Here's all the different things we were hearing. This actually might be, no, this is that's from a couple weeks ago. Here's this week as we're working through. There's a couple pages that go for this week, but it's always a waiting process. I've got 2 or 3 text messages out, 3 or 4 direct messages out. Hopefully at least a few of those get answered tonight, so we have some good information to put on the board for tomorrow. We already have some good information actually to put on the message boards at Panther-Lair.com for tomorrow, but I'd like to get a little bit more because it's always fun to have more than we already have. It's good to start off with some. It's always better to have more. So we'll see what comes up. I don't think we'll have any breaking news in the middle of this live stream. Certainly, I remember last year, it was probably right around this time, wasn't it? We had the Kenny Pickett news that he was, or I guess it wouldn't have been last year at this time, it would have been 2 years ago at this time, that we had the Kenny Pickett news that he was coming back for another year at Pitt. Wow, have we been doing the live? We've been doing the live stream that long. It's kind of wild. It was December of 2020 when Kenny Pickett announced he was coming back for another year, and we were live that night. And I'm sitting here and I get the alert on my phone. And wait, what is this? And I open it up and I say, "We've got some news, folks." I can still remember saying it and being sort of dumbfounded because I had always been waiting for that moment when news broke in the middle of a live stream. And I was always kind of curious, like, when that happens, how am I going to react? What am I going to do? What am I going to say? How am I going to handle it? And there it was. That's really the only time I can think of. There have been different times that I've gotten text messages or direct messages in the middle of a show, and they've offered some interesting information. Things that I'm sort of like, wow, can't wait till it's 9:30 and I can follow up on a few of these things. But we'll see if anything comes back tonight. Probably nothing that'll make it into the live show as we talk, but there might be, we'll see what kind of information we can pull out tonight. Anyway, I'm Chris Peak from Panther-Lair.com. You see the website there, Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com, the most comprehensive source of Pitt sports news on the internet, football, basketball, and recruiting. Find it all at Panther-Lair.com, and of course, message boards where you can hang out with, as someone on the message board said this week, you can hang out with hundreds and thousands of your closest Pitt fan friends all day, every day. People are posting about Pitt sports on the message boards at Panther-Lair.com. And that's especially true over the last 2 weeks as recruiting has kicked into high gear. It's recruiting of high school prospects, recruiting of transfers, and of course the ever-pressing question of who's coming back and who's leaving. There's been a lot to talk about on the message boards at Panther-Lair.com, and they've been very active for the last 2 weeks. It's been a lot of fun. Of course, then we bring a lot of the video content here, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. So while you're here, like this video. As my kids say, smash the like video. Now, for the older folks among us, for our older fans and viewers, that doesn't mean to get a hammer and literally smash the like button. Just take your finger and just touch the like button. I had to clarify this. Make sure we're understanding here. Don't break your phone, don't break your computer because you throw a brick at the like button. Just touch the like button. But emphatically, smash it. Smash the like button and subscribe. You can click the subscribe button right down there and join our group here on YouTube, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. We have our live show every Wednesday night at 8:30 like this. And then, of course, we do the morning Pitt videos Monday through Friday. Every morning a new Pitt video comes out, something new to talk about, something new to think about, something to get your day started right here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. So we appreciate everybody who checks those videos out every day. We've had a lot of good content, I think, this week on the message boards and on the video front. So I hope you got a chance to check it out because it's been fun. And it's certainly been an active week. I'm trying to remember what even happened since the last live show. I mean, like, these last 2 weeks have sort of blurred together. I was thinking about it before I started. I was like, well, I should recap what's happened since last Wednesday, but I don't remember what's happened since last Wednesday. I do know they got a commitment, though. TJ Harvison, the 3-star running back from Georgia, committed to Pitt yesterday. He took his official visit over the weekend. I thought there was a chance he would commit on the official visit. When he didn't, I still was pretty sure he was going to end up committing. I thought it might be today, Wednesday, because Pat Narduzzi and Archie Collins were having an in-home visit with Harvison today. Pretty sure that happened tonight. And so I thought that would be the date of the I thought he would commit then. You know what I mean? That would sort of be the the push from Narduzzi would get him over the edge. But I think he knew what he needed to know from the official visit. I think that pretty much sold him on Pitt. I guess he got home and waited for the graphics and the video and that kind of thing because that's part of the recruiting process now. But Pitt sold TJ Harvison, and I think they're getting a really good running back prospect. It puts 2 running backs in the class of 2023. These are guys finishing up their senior years of high school. They'll be freshmen at Pitt next year. Of course, they have Montravius Lloyd, the Florida running back, who committed in June. And now they have TJ Harvison, and they're really 2 different types of backs. You know, I think you even just look at the usage. I mean, Harvison is an every down, lead back. You know, a number 1 running back. He's not a committee type of guy. He rushed for more than 2,000 yards this year, scored more than 20 touchdowns, led his team to a state championship, and really did the work himself. In the state title game, he had like 200 rushing yards and a touchdown. He had a great senior season. Montravius Lloyd had a good senior season, but just a little bit different. I didn't carry the ball all that much. I think he had 46 rushing attempts and 40 receptions. He was really a versatile weapon, taking handoffs out of the backfield, but also catching passes out of the backfield, in addition to lining up in the slot and operating that way. I think he finished with 600 or 700 yards of total offense, scored like 7 touchdowns, something like that. He's a playmaker. He's a versatile playmaker, and he's a player. They don't really have someone like him, that sort of slot back type of guy. I think there was a chance that maybe Che Wabuko might be that kind of player, but I don't think that's really in his future. Vincent Davis, they sort of flirted with the idea of using him in that way, but it never really came to fruition. Montravius Lloyd could be that kind of player. I think he's got speed, he's explosive, he's a good athlete, and he's a guy that, his high school, they just try and get the ball in his hands. Whether, like I say, he's lining up in the slot, he's in the backfield, he's all over the place. And it'll be interesting to see what Pitt does with him. They haven't really had a guy with that sort of skill set. That's not to say that, he's better than anybody they've ever had. It's not saying, they've never had a guy like him. He's just a unique player that, in 3 years of watching Frank Cignetti's offense at Pitt and then, sort of casually checking in on it at Boston College over the last 2 years, I don't really see another player who's been used the way the Montravius Lloyd potentially could be used. Like I say, is that sort of slot back role, a guy who could be in the backfield or line up in the slot and run pass routes and catch passes. You can count on him as a pass catcher. And we really haven't seen that kind of a player. And again, Vincent Davis maybe could have been in that role, and he lined up in the slot some this past season. But I never really know, was he lining up in the slot as a receiver, or was he lining up in the slot because he was the running back on that play, and sometimes they go with an empty set. I think, sort of anecdotally, there were at least some snaps where Davis was in the slot and there was a running back in the backfield, which would maybe be along the lines of what we're talking about with Montravius Lloyd. But I think, probably most of the times that Vincent Davis was in the slot, it was an empty set, and he was the running back in that personnel grouping. So they haven't really used anyone like that. They haven't had that kind of player who can work like that. So it'll be interesting to see what Frank Cignetti wants to do with Montravius Lloyd. TJ Harvison is far less, there's far less mystery about his usage. He's a tailback. You line him up in the backfield. You hand it off to him. You run counter, power, toss, all those different things you want to do. and you let him go. He's a bigger kind of back. Although Montravius Lloyd, I think probably weighs more. They're probably around the same weight. Lloyd, I think Harvison is probably a little taller, but they're not too dissimilar in terms of body size, height and weight. But they're different types of runners. I think Harvison is more of a power runner, but he's got speed to sort of break away. Whereas Lloyd is, like I say, you want to get him out in space. He's that kind of guy. It's not quite to the Thunder and Lightning extreme of the 2019 class with Daniel Carter and Vincent Davis. I mean, that was Thunder and Lightning. It still is. For the last 4 years, that's been Thunder and Lightning. Those guys never changed their game. They are the players they were when they got to Pitt. They've grown and matured and all that stuff. But I mean, that's Thunder and Lightning. Harbison and Lloyd is not Carter and Davis. Carter and Davis were extreme versions of Thunder and Lightning out of the backfield. Harbison and Lloyd will be they're a little closer in skill set than Carter and Davis are. So with those two guys in, that's two running backs in the recruiting class of 2023. And I talked about this on the Morning Pit today, actually, about what that means for the depth chart and the roster going forward. So I won't dig too deep into it, but sort of briefly, I mean, nobody expects Izzy Abanikanda to come back. Nobody expects Vincent Davis to come back. I think both of those guys are gone. So you're looking at returning two scholarship running backs. We're not counting Daniel Carter here. He's a fullback. But you're looking at returning Rodney Hammond and Sebo Flemister, assuming Flemister returns to play at Pitt for his super senior season, which I think is the expectation. Pat Narduzzi said before it's his hope, but I haven't seen anything official, so you kind of wait to see what happens there. But you're looking at two scholarship backs on the roster returning, and so it makes sense to add two freshmen. Now, the sort of wild card out there, the X factor that we've talked a lot about on the message board, or talked a lot about on the message boards at Panther-Lair.com, and I talked about on the Morning Pit today. And I'm sure we're going to get questions and comments right up there in the chat screen. So you guys can put your comments and questions in there. I'm going to check that in a second. I'm sure people were already asking about it. But it's Derek Davis, former 4-star prospect from Gateway, recruiting class of 2021, 2 years ago, signed with LSU. He's been in Baton Rouge for the last 2 seasons, played in 12 games as a freshman, almost all on special teams. Played in about 4 games last year, mostly on defense and special teams until the final game. His final game. It wasn't LSU's final game of the season. They played UAB in like the penultimate game of the regular season, and they beat UAB soundly. No problem. It was like a 3-touchdown win. And on the final full drive, Derek Davis lined up at running back. Took about 4 carries on that drive for 23 yards, I think. After UAB got the ball back and then punted or whatever, LSU ran one more play before regulation, before the end of the fourth quarter, and that play was a 5-yard handoff to Derek Davis. So he ended up with 5 carries for about 28 yards. And this is where it gets interesting for Pitt, because I think with Derek Davis going into the transfer portal, I think Pitt is a very realistic option for him. I think it's a priority school for him. And I think if they take him, they will take him as a running back. And I've gone back and forth about this a lot over the last couple of days, since Davis went into the portal. When did he even go into the portal? Tuesday? Monday? I think it might have been Monday he went into the transfer portal. Monday or Tuesday. I'm losing track of my days. But I guess it was Monday because we talked about it on Tuesday on the Morning Pit. Since he went into the transfer portal, so over the last 2 days, 3 days, I've thought a lot about it. I've gone back and forth. I've not sold on him for defense. Should they take him for offense? And I went back and watched his film from Gateway again, and I think it was just from his junior season because I don't think he played in 2020 when he was a senior because it was a COVID year. I think he might have opted out like some other guys did, like Elliot Donald did at Central Catholic. And I went back and watched his junior film and didn't really feel like fishing all the way through the UAB game to get to his 5 carries at the end. But just watching his junior film again from Gateway, he was a pretty impressive player on offense. Pretty impressive player on offense. A little bit bigger, but with good athleticism and really good speed. And I think when you watch, again, junior film from Gateway is like 3 or 4 years old now. Maybe 4 years old. But when you watch that film, I mean, if you block the play for him, and he only has one man to beat, he can sometimes beat the guy and he sometimes can't. But when he beats the guy, or when you block it up just right for him that he's got an opening, he can go. He can be a home run hitter. And I think there's value in that kind of guy. Now, you'd like to be able to, make a couple cuts. You'd like to be able to, break tackles. You'd like to be able to, break a guy down and make him miss and all that kind of stuff. Andre Powell always says, if we block 10 guys, you're going to make the 11th guy miss. And, you may go back and forth on what he can do in that regard. But when he makes that guy miss, when the play is blocked up well, when the opening is there, he can take off and go. Like, not necessarily like Izzy Abanikanda, but kind of like Izzy Abanikanda, a home run hitter. And Izzy may be more of a home run hitter than Derek Davis, but my point is there are some of those guys out there who are that home run hitter. And I still remember James Conner being mad that I said he wasn't a home run hitter. I remember him maybe like sophomore year at Pitt. I think I'd written it when he was a freshman or maybe even when he was coming out of high school that he wasn't going to be that kind of guy who, I forget, I might have even used the phrase home run hitter. I might have said he's not going to be a home run hitting guy, but he's going to grind out a lot of yards. And I remember him like being in a press conference at Pitt, probably before his sophomore year, I think it was, like during training camp. And he's like, yeah, I read on Rivals that I'm not a home run hitter. I just cracked up. And, he's not. He's not. When he almost hit a home run against Georgia Tech his sophomore year, he didn't. He got caught from behind and he fumbled the ball out of the end zone and the possession turned over to Georgia Tech. That was one of those 5 fumbles to open the game. I'm going off on a tangent now or a little digression, but I think Derek Davis has that ability. You know what I mean? Not all guys have that ability to run away from the defense, but Derek Davis, I think he does. And because of that, I think he's worth a scholarship spot. And if you bring him in, and you've got Rodney Hammond, and you've got Sibo Flemister, and you've got him as 3 sort of older college players, guys who've been in the college game for a couple of years, and then you have the 2 freshmen, Lloyd and Harvison, I think you're content to roll with that. You know what I mean? Like, I think you're content to roll with that because now you've got 3 guys you should be able to go to before you have to get to the freshmen. And if you do end up, if and when the number 1 guy gets hurt, you kind of roll with those other 2. If one of them gets hurt, then you turn to a freshman. You see how a freshman can hang as the backup running back. I don't know if you necessarily want to go with just Hammond and Flemister and the 2 freshmen. I think you want to bring in another back. And that's kind of the other question Pitt's facing, right? That's the other question that Pitt has to answer for itself is, there's 2 parts to it. When they're looking at this Derek Davis situation, do they want to bring in a transfer running back? We've seen them kick the tires a little bit on this guy or that guy, but do they want to bring in a transfer running back? And if they do they then believe that Derek Davis is an ACC level, a Power 5 level running back? I think the answer to the first one should be yes. It makes sense. I think even just to fill out the depth like Sibo Flemister was last year, where they brought him in after Jordan Bailey was unable to qualify. And Andre Powell said that, you'd like to have, I think he said like you have 5 scholarship backs. And so they had to, they didn't have to, but they brought in Flemister to kind of fill that out. That got him up to 4 plus Daniel Carter, right? Izzy, Hammond, Vincent Davis. Flemister got him up to 4 plus Daniel Carter. So I think the answer to the first question is yes, they should get a transfer running back. And then the answer to the second question is he an ACC? Is Derek Davis an ACC level running back? I think he's got enough physical attributes that you're willing to find out. You're willing to put him on the field and find out. So that'll be interesting to see. Of course, that would be another, if Derek Davis does end up at Pitt, that would be another WPIAL, a former WPIAL star coming home after Phil Dracovic is already in the mix. Pitt obviously working on Dante Cephas from Penn Hills, who went to Kent State. Working on Donovan McMillan, the safety from Peters Township, who went to Florida, probably, and really not probably, but better chances with the latter than the former. We'll keep an eye on those situations as they develop over the next few days. So, that's sort of what's been happening lately, and just continued efforts in the recruiting, to hold on to the current class, the class of 2023, and then secure a few transfers and see if they can wrap up 1 or 2 more recruits probably this weekend. So we'll keep an eye out to see what happens there. I want to get into the comments and questions, though. There's really no time to, no reason to waste anytime. You guys have a lot of comments and questions already out there, and so we want to make sure we get to as much as we can. Before I get to the comments and questions, though, I got to tell you about our friend Chris Gates. And if you guys have been watching this live stream for the, basically since the season started, you know about Chris Gates. You know what he's got going on. You've heard me talk about Chris and his online fitness coaching business. He's an online fitness coach. He works with people all over the world to create customized fitness and nutrition programs that work. And he really supports his clients every step of the way. Plus, he's a huge Pitt fan and he loves supporting the podcast, which we really appreciate. Now, to start 2023, Chris is going to be opening up applications and accepting new clients from January 2nd through January 8th. And after that, applications will be closed until the late spring or the early summer. And since Chris started supporting the podcast and we started talking about him here, he's actually had a bunch of listeners to the podcast sign up for coaching since the beginning of the football season. And their transformations have been really impressive. And that's a great thing about Chris. He doesn't just tell you, go do this and I'll talk to you later. He checks in with you. He keeps up with you. He finds out how you're doing and helps you through the whole process of lifestyle, health, nutrition, fitness, all of it. And that's what Chris does. And he was telling me earlier today that it's been awesome to see Pitt fans who listen to this podcast, watch this live stream, then reach out to him and really undergo a transformation over the last 3-4 months. It's been really exciting for him, and I'm excited to hear about it. He's not telling me any names or anything, but he's told me that people have really had a lot of success, which is great. So if you're interested in setting up a health or fitness goal for the new year, or and you want to make sure you're able to not only make progress but sustain it, go to chrisgatesfitness.com. Chris, C-H-R-I-S, Gates, G-A-T-E-S, fitness.com. to learn more, to find out who Chris is, what Chris does, and how he can help you with your fitness, nutrition, health, lifestyle goals. And if you go there now, you mentioned Panther-Lair, you can save 75% off your first month of coaching if you mention Panther-Lair when you apply. I mean, if you get 75% off of just about anything, you should probably take it. And if it's a service like what Chris is offering, something that can genuinely change your life, you should do it. chrisgatesfitness.com, mention Panther-Lair. When you go, you get 75% off your first month of coaching. All right, let's get into some comments and questions here. Matt P starts it off right away. Says, just one comment on recruiting. Obviously, there isn't correlation, but it's interesting that this wave of hometown momentum, even if it's via the portal, is coming after the slide in recruiting overall. So there's a couple of things there, Matt, that you're kind of digging into. There's a couple things. Let's start with the Whitfield kids coming home. So Phil Dracovic is already here. Pitt's working on Donovan McMillan and Dante Cephas. Cephas is not really a great example. You didn't bring him up. I did. Cephas is a guy that Pitt did not recruit out of high school due to academic issues. That's why he ended up at Kent State. He was talented enough to go to a Power 5 school, but he didn't have any options because of the academics. And so that's how he ended up going to Kent State out of Penn Hills. So he doesn't really count. He's not a guy who shunned Pitt, went away, is now considering coming back. But Phil Dracovic, Pine Richland, went to Notre Dame, went to Boston College. He said no to Pitt twice. You know what I mean? He somehow he missed the third one. Before the rooster crowed 3 times. He only denied Pitt twice. But now he's coming back. Donovan McMillan turned down Pitt. Didn't even put Pitt in his top 10 that he released in like May of his junior year. Ends up committing to Florida. Now he's back on the transfer market and definitely a real candidate to come back to Pittsburgh. Derek Davis, like we said, I think was pretty interested in Pitt coming out of Gateway. Ends up going to LSU 2 years later. He's looking for a new home. Pitt's an option there. And then you can even like roll the clock back to MJ Devonshire out of Aliquippa. Goes to Kentucky, plays for a couple years, turns down Pitt, comes home. And has a lot of success. He's been really good. John Patrician. Loved Pat Narduzzi, loved Pitt, and then went to Penn State and stayed there for a couple years, came back and ended up, somebody got mad at me for saying he had a great career. He had a great season last year, 2021, 74 tackles and 8.5 tackles for loss and 4.5 sacks and 3 interceptions. I know all these stats because I just wrote them in a back and forth on the comment section of one of our morning Pitt videos here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. And so it's not enough to call it a trend, but it's definitely a thing that has happened, is guys go away and then come back home. And it's not necessarily new. I can remember, the Dave Wanstead years. Guys on that staff telling me, just in general conversation, oh yeah, remember this guy? Yeah, he wants to come home. He keeps calling us and asking if he can transfer in, but we're not this or that. And so it's not new for local players to go away and then want to come home. Maybe get a sense that maybe the grass wasn't greener, or maybe that Pitt really was the best option for them to begin with. And so that's not a new phenomenon. And it's really, it's a handful of guys we're talking about. We're talking about Patrician. We're talking about Devonshire. We're talking about, so far this year, at least, Jakovic, with maybe one or two more to join in. And so I'm not going to say, wow, it keeps happening, all these Whippeal guys, because there's lots of Whippeal guys that have gone away and stayed away. Didn't come back or didn't try to come back. So it's not, like I said, it's not a trend. But it's interesting to see. And I talked about this probably earlier in the week on the Morning Pit, that there's sort of a couple angles to it. That it's, on one hand, you take those guys, you bring them back, they have success, like MJ Devonshire or Johnny Patrician, if Phil Dracovic has a good year. And you'd like to think, if you're Pitt, that's going to send a message to younger Whippeal players. Hey, you might think the grass is greener out there, but these are guys who went somewhere else, didn't get the support they thought they were going to get, or didn't have the success they thought they were going to have, and they came home and they're flourishing, right? You'd like to think that message is going to get sent, and maybe some of the younger recruits will pick up on it and decide that they want to stay home as opposed to going away. But the flip side, though, is you wonder if you're sending a different message, a message of, it's okay. Go out and see the world. Go visit go attend whatever schools you want to attend. See what life is like in the SEC for a year or two. See what life is like. The SEC is a good example when we're talking about, Devonshire, potentially Davis, potentially McMillan. Go see the SEC. Go live in the Big Ten. And then after a year or two, when it doesn't work out, you can always come home to Pitt. This fallback option is always here for you. And you don't necessarily want to send that message. But the reality is, even if that message is being sent, if you get these guys coming back after 2 years and you think they're talented and they can help you, you take them. You don't turn them down out of pride. You don't turn them down to make a point. You don't turn them down to send your own message. No, you either come here first or you don't come here at all. You don't do that. If they're guys who can help you, you take them. There were no hard feelings about MJ Devonshire. Even if there were, they set him aside and they took him and he's helped them. Even if there were hard feelings about Donovan McMillan not putting Pitt in his top 10, you set him aside and you take him because he can help you. Same thing with Derek Davis, any of these guys. If there were hard feelings about Phil Dracovic turning down Pitt twice, you set them aside and you take him if you believe he can help you. And it seems like Pitt believes he can help them. And so, that's kind of one, that's a couple of the angles. I talked about this the other day on the Morning Pit. That's a couple of the angles that sort of go with the Whippeal thing. The second part of your comment, though, Matt, you say this is coming after the slide in recruiting overall. And here's what I would say about that. All right, because there's been a lot of conversation on the boards about the recruiting bump, and I'll take full credit or blame for it, no matter how, however you want to put it. I'll take full responsibility, because I talked about how the ACC championship would result in a recruiting bump. That the 2023 class will be the class that really showed the impact of the ACC championship, and Pitt's class, they would put together a really good class, and they would get this and they would get that. And by the stars and the rankings, that hasn't happened. I think their class is ranked 53rd. They've had 7 decommitments, at least six of which were guys they wanted to hold on to. Maybe 5. But it's still a lot. And so it sort of looks like that bump hasn't happened. But I would maintain that I think there are a few ways you can look at it and say, well, the recruiting bump did happen. The first of all, I think when you look at the fact that at one point this class had Jordan Bass, Shadarian Harrison, Shelton Lewis, Bryce Pollock. There's one more I thought. Even just those four. Those four are legitimate studs. I don't care that we have them ranked as 3 stars right now. Shelton Lewis decommitted to go to Clemson. Jordan Bass had serious pursuit from other schools. So did Shadarian Harrison. So did Bryce Pollock, who ultimately decommitted and went to Mississippi State. Those were big-time prospects. 3 of them were defensive backs, and the other one was a linebacker. Those are big-time prospects. The types of kids that Pitt really didn't get in previous years. Those kids committing, when they committed, even if some of them are no longer committed, those kids committing was a sign of the recruiting bump. It was. It was what we saw in June. I think we have those guys underrated. All 4 of them I think we have underrated. Bass, Harrison, Pollock, and Lewis. Even the 2 guys who are no longer committed to Pitt. This isn't just about boosting Pitt's commitments. Those 2 guys, Lewis and Pollock, are underrated. They're 4-star prospects. Bass is a 4-star prospect. Shadarian Harrison is a 4-star prospect. And I think their college careers, as long as they don't derail it with maturity or some issues like that, transferring and things like that, as long as they stick to it and work, I think those guys, all 4 of them, are going to be really good college football players. Potential all-conference players. I think they'll be that good. And that's, the level of prospect that Pitt was getting commitments from in this class. I think Kenny Minchie is another example. I think he's a guy who's really, Isaiah Neal, the defensive tackle. If you look at the initial run of commitments, they built off the momentum of the ACC championship, not as well as you could, but really well. Doing it as well as you could would probably mean getting, maybe like a Hakeem Williams or someone like that to commit and not just visit. But I would say even the extended interest with Williams was a result of the recruiting bump that came with the ACC championship. Now, unfortunately, Williams didn't go to Pitt. You know what I mean? Unfortunately, Shelton Lewis decommitted and went to Clemson. Unfortunately, Bryce Pollock decommitted and went to Mississippi State. So you only get, half credit or less. But if you want to talk about, why didn't they have any recruiting momentum come out of the ACC championship? I would contend that they did. And I think you saw it manifest through June. I think by the time you got to end of June, Pitt coaches felt like they were building their best class yet. And I think there were a lot of us that could have made a similar case. Their best class under Pat Narduzzi. It's been a little bit harder to hold the class together. The decommitments of Lewis and Pollock sting, particularly Minchie especially, is a big loss, I think. As well as Phillip Daniels, the offensive lineman, and I think those were probably the main ones that stung the most when they lost them. But I do think there was momentum that came out of the ACC championship. And like I say, I think it manifested in June with the run of commitments that they had. So I don't think it's been an overall slide. And I think if they're able to hold on to Jordan Bass and Shadarian Harrison, which it looks like they will be, and Isaiah Neal, which it looks like it will be, who is now a 4-star as a defensive tackle prospect, I think, there's still a good amount of talent in this class. I think Lamar Seymour, the wide receiver from Miami, is a really good receiver prospect. I think Kenny Johnson's a pretty good wide receiver prospect too, out of York, Pennsylvania. I think they have good recruits in this class. And I think if guys like Bass and Harrison were properly rated, we would probably all feel much better about this class. I think it looks much better because they'd have 3 or 4 4-star prospects in the class. Kenny Minchie ended up as a 4-star after he committed to Notre Dame. Ain't that something? I don't think I'm not even going to go down that path. But I mean, this class as it could have been, or as it was at one point, could have looked pretty good from the star side, from the aesthetics of star rankings. It just, there were a few guys that weren't able to hold on to. And, this is probably the risk you always run when you take a bunch of commitments in June, which you'd rather get the commitment in June and run the risk of losing it than not get the commitment at all, I think. So, I don't think there was necessarily an issue with the process. But you do run that risk of potentially losing guys late in the cycle when other schools come in and they have an opportunity to take an official visit. So I don't think it's been as much of a slide as it's been made out to be. I think there was more of a recruiting bump than what is perceived by many. It's not entirely what I expected it to be, but I think there's still pieces of it there. Byron Fleck, looks like you chimed in as a super chatter. Byron, I don't see. It says prediction for 2023. Tough schedule. Pitt wins 3 to 6 games. Not good. Discuss. Well, Byron, it gets more and more difficult every year, or it's going to continue to get more and more difficult every year to predict a record when we're sitting in the middle of December, because you really don't know what the roster is going to look like. I mean, you don't. They're not done adding transfers. They're not done losing transfers. It's going to be an ongoing process. Sorry, got a couple of those direct messages I was talking about. I got distracted there. I shouldn't get distracted, but I'm glad I got the messages that I got. It's going to be an ongoing process of building the roster over the next couple weeks, month, 2 months, somewhere around there. I mean, we saw them add transfers into the spring, you know what I mean? And even into the summer. And so you're still building that roster. I mean, there's still some key questions to answer about who's going to be back, about who might transfer, about who returns for a super senior year, about who they bring in as a transfer. And if they bring in, a couple stud wide receivers, that changes your perspective on what the season's going to look like. If Jared Wayne comes back, that's going to impact your perception of what the season's going to look like. If, if they get a Donovan McMillan, that's going to have an impact on what you think the season is going to look like. I don't think they'll be a 3 to 6 win team. They shouldn't be a 3 to 6 win team. I mean, we saw this year, this Pitt team with pretty poor and below average quarterback play for most of the season still win 8 games and be, a short hair away from at least 1 or 2 more. Did I say still win 6 games? They still won 8 games, is what I meant to say. I forget if I actually said the word 8 or 6. But we saw them still win 8 games and be really close away from, 1 or 2 more. And that was with pretty subpar quarterback play. I don't know what Phil Dracovic is going to be this year. I don't know how he's going to do. I really don't know. I don't think his production will be any worse than what they got out of the quarterback position this past season. I really don't. Now, are they going to have somebody to make up the difference with the running game? I don't know if they'll have an Israel Abanikanda, but they've got a Rodney Hammond, which is pretty good. And I think Sebo Flemister can be a nice complementary piece. And then we'll see what they fill in after that. But I don't think the quarterback production could be really any worse than it was this past year when they still managed to get 8 wins. Now, the schedule's tougher. They do have West Virginia, Cincinnati, and Notre Dame, as opposed to just having West Virginia and Tennessee. But, I don't know. No, I'm not going 3 to 6 games. I mean, I think the floor for this program is 8. And 8 is where it should start every year. And if they fall below that line, it's a disappointing, underperforming season. And it's funny because we say that this past year, this 8-win season was disappointing and underperforming, and it was. But I think it would be. I think you still have to set that baseline at 8. Now, I might not go out and predict 10-2 like I did this past summer. Ahead of the 2022 season, I might only predict 8-4. Depending on kind of what we see, how we see this roster come together, and what we're hearing about some of these guys in practice and that kind of thing. But I'm not going to go out and predict 3 to 6 wins. No dice, Byron. Adam Vinchik says, when is the deadline for transfers to commit? Is it the same as signing day? Not really. And the reality is, even like the recruits, you have to. I mean, you just have to be. You have to enroll. You know what I mean? Like signing day is a big deal, and it's you sign a letter of intent, and that really kind of binds you legally. It's a legally binding document. You are going to that school. But the important papers, the things that really like get you in, are like the admissions and all of that stuff. And the reality is, as long as you enroll and get in classes and get your aid package set up, it doesn't matter what you do on December 21st. Now, don't tell anyone that. Keep that between us, okay? Because we still want signing day to be a big deal. But I mean, transfers, honestly, I think they have till the end of the ad drop period. I mean, really, is what it comes down to, which is a week or so into school, into the semester. I think they just need to be enrolled by then. Maybe there's an enrollment date, or enrollment cutoff a little bit sooner than the ad drop date, but that's when. So even if next Wednesday, because signing day is a week from today, even if next Wednesday they don't get all the transfers that they were hoping for, they don't have everybody signed or this or that, and there are still transfers out there that they're looking at and trying to land, they've still got until the first week or two of January to get those guys on board. And so it won't really end on December 21st. I think with high school recruits, it'll mostly end on December 21st, unless there's some guys they want to pursue in January to sign in February. But with the transfers, that pursuit will continue just without any in-person visits all the way up until the spring semester starts. Let's see. Will says, I think the portal will balance out NIL in the long run. Let the elite high school kids get their payday. They'll realize in 1 to 2 years that culture and overall fit matters just as much. The money will come. So I've been thinking a lot about NIL monies, and we'll talk about this, different parts of this, probably over the next few days, next few weeks, next few months. I could tell you on Friday in the 321 column, I have 2 sections dedicated to talking about NIL and the challenges facing Pitt in the world of NIL, the name, image, likeness deals, and kind of why it's difficult for Pitt right now and why it might be difficult for Pitt going forward. And so you can look for that. We'll talk a lot about NIL, but one thing I've been thinking about with NIL right now is if you've got, let's say you have a collective, right? And say that collective has X amount of money that it can use toward working deals for Pitt student athletes, right? To me, I think your priorities have to go like this. Number 1, player retention. Number 2, the transfer portal. Number 3, high school recruits. I think what is going to happen, and you're going to find it out, I think they're going to find out pretty quick over, in the next year or so, if they haven't already figured it out, is spending on the recruits is not the best money you can spend. Not in football, at least. Maybe in basketball, but not in football. A handful of elite guys at the very top, yes. But for the most part, no. Not to say there won't be any money for recruits, but that's not the best use of money. That's not going to have the most direct and immediate impact on the team's success. Keeping your best players will. Getting really good transfers will. Getting Jordan Addison, and more importantly, Caleb Williams, that will have an impact. Pitt holding on to Jordan Addison will have the biggest impact. This is, those are the areas where I think you're going to see more NIL money go to retention and transfers than you're seeing go to the recruits. And what's also happening is that the pool of money is sort of decreasing a little bit. Jordan Rooney, who's a pretty influential guy locally, had a really good tweet on this. Let's see if I can find it. He's an influential guy locally, works with a lot of local recruits, works with transfers. I think he's involved in the NIL space in a number of ways. Let me see. I want to find, he had a really good tweet on I just want to find this because I thought he made the point really well. Here, last year was a different story for the portal. Not every player was asking for money, so you were seeing big price tags. This year, every player is asking for money and a lot of it. Collectives are budgeting for 10 to 15 transfers. They aren't spending a ton on one player. He also said you aren't seeing a lot of transfer portal commitments yet because players have poor management and don't understand their value. 500 players are saying that they need six figures, and not many collectives are paying that. Your spot's going to get taken. Take the 30K to 50K. And I thought that was really interesting stuff from Jordan. Jordan Rooney's a personal brand coach, CEO of Jaster Athletes, helps athletes build their brands and works in the NIL space. And I just thought that was a really interesting take on it, that what I think a lot of people have expected over the last year or two is sort of a market correction, that it sort of becomes apparent that you can't spend like, Texas A&M reportedly spent. You can't do that every year. Eventually it stops making sense, if it ever did in the first place. And I think we've been waiting for that market correction to happen. I've been waiting for that market correction to happen. You can't give a freshman $1 million. You know what I mean? Like you don't have the likelihood of a bust is too high to make that a worthwhile investment. Now, if you're talking about a Heisman Trophy winning quarterback or a Heisman Trophy candidate quarterback, or a guy who has had 2 years of really strong quarterback play, yes, he could potentially turn your team around. He might be worth an investment of that value. But a high school kid is going to be less, and some transfers are going to be less. And if you have that stud quarterback on your roster now, he's worth that money. And so I kept wondering if we were going to see that sort of correction of making the money a little more reasonable. It's never going to get totally reasonable because it's college sports, and college sports are out of control. And I say that in the fondest possible way. But it could get a little more reasonable. And I think we're seeing that a little bit as we move forward here. I forget what were we even talking about there. So that's what I would do is the money on the money on the retention, the money on transfers, and then the money on the high schools. Panther Room says Pitt is going after a lot of tight ends in the transfer portal. I'm guessing the bowl game will be Gavin's last game. I don't know about that. I don't know about that at all, actually. I actually think the opposite. I think they want to get a transfer tight end to come in and complement Gavin Bartholomew. And like, they might be after a lot of guys, but I think they want to get one guy. And I don't necessarily mean one specific guy. Oh, they have just this one guy that they really want to get. But I think they have a priority board. But I think they want to bring in one tight end so they can run some viable two tight end sets with Gavin Bartholomew and a transfer who's had success at another school, maybe, and be able to do that maybe more than they were able to do with Gavin Bartholomew and Carter Johnson. I think they like the potential of Carter Johnson. I think he can do some things to help them. I'm not sure if he can be the complementary tight end to Gavin Bartholomew that they need or want. So I think that's what they're looking for. And I actually expect, there was a time when I didn't, but I do now actually expect Gavin Bartholomew to be back next season. Let's see here. S-Mac says, sorry if you've discussed this in a previous podcast, but have you given your prediction on which Pitt players get drafted in the 2023 NFL draft, and maybe give a couple undrafted free agent predictions? Who gets drafted? I think Izzy Banakanda gets drafted. I think Kalijah Cansey gets drafted. I think Haba Baldonado probably gets drafted. He's going to have to test well. I think like a Marcus Minor gets drafted. Maybe Carter Warren. Maybe. I don't know. But I would think Minor should. DBs, I think if Eric Hallett and Brandon Hill both go, I think those guys should have a good chance. I think those guys will both test really well. Servassier Dennis probably. I think now I'm talking about like 7 guys, and I just don't know if I see that happening. I mean, Abanikanda is a definite. Cansey is a definite, I would say. I would say Baldonado, Hill, Hallett are all likely. Minor is probable, I would think, would be my guess. Dennis is likely or probable, I would say. So somewhere in there. I mean, that would probably be my... And those guys, anybody in that group that I just mentioned who, if they don't get drafted, I think they will be, undrafted free agents. I think they'll get an opportunity to play in the NFL, at least to try out in the NFL. BMX asks, who will win the bowl game? I have no idea because I don't even know who's playing in the bowl game. Nick Vaccaro says, in the same light as the running back preview from today, could you offer a preview of how the wide receiver and tight end rooms may look during spring practice? Yeah, we'll get there, Nick. I don't want to dodge your question. You're right. We went deep on the running backs today on the morning pit, and that was kind of due to getting TJ Harvison commitment and then the ongoing Derek Davis story. And so it felt particularly relevant and timely. We're going to have a lot of time, though, between now and whenever to talk about it. I was actually thinking about that today. I was like, boy, topics just keep coming up. This has been going great on these morning pit videos since the beginning of August. We've always had stuff to talk about. Obviously, during the season, it was easy. And since the season ended, we've had a million topics to talk about. But, boy, we're going to hit some dry periods in here. We're going to talk a lot of basketball. We're going to need something else to fill in some of the holes. And so position previews are certainly going to be part of it. I think as we get a little bit more, a little clearer picture of how things are coming together with some of those, with some of the, transfers and recruits and super seniors, we'll have a better idea of what those rooms will look like. So I'm not going to dodge your question, Nick, but I'm going to have to just table it for now. Panther Room says the schedule is not as tough as we would think. West Virginia's trash. Cincinnati will be trash. Notre Dame and Florida State could be tough. And Nick Appel replies, Cincinnati without Fickle is beatable for sure. Pitt almost always plays Notre Dame tough too. And Dracovic will want revenge as well. He'll fight hard for that win. Yeah, I'm curious to see. I mean, West Virginia looks like it's struggling with the portal right now. The portal gives and the portal takes away. Right now they're getting taken away. We'll see how West Virginia reloads from some of the guys that are losing to the transfer portal this offseason. I'm never going to take a game in Morgantown lightly. Never going to take a game in South Bend lightly. Pitt has Cincinnati at home. We'll see how Cincinnati is post Luke Fickle. We'll see what they look like. I think Cincinnati, I think they've built the team well, but it's Scott Satterfield's the coach there now, right? Now, he beat Pitt last time he faced them, so can't count anything out. But it's a tough schedule, but it's an ACC schedule, and you've got two. Is Cincinnati going to be in the Big 12 by then? Maybe 3 Power 5 non-conference opponents in West Virginia, Cincinnati, and Notre Dame. Even if they're not in by then, we still might as well count it as such. It's going to be a tough schedule in the non-conference. The rest is an ACC schedule. Yeah, Florida State's a challenge. But, again, the floor for this program should be where we say it is. It should be 8 wins year after year. Unless there's some major disaster that happens, big injuries, multiple injuries, you're down to your 4th quarterback or something like that. But as long as you stay relatively healthy, as long as you more or less keep your most of your roster on the field, 8 wins should be the baseline. It's what it should be really going forward. And I've said that for a while now. I think that's really where things should start with this team. Let's see if you guys have any other comments or questions in there. As we head toward the weekend, I guess, our last couple minutes here, it's a week until signing day. Like I say, Pitt's already got 15 recruits committed in this class, plus the 1 transfer, Phil Dracovic. They'll announce all 16 of those guys. I would expect right now they will add 1, 2, at least 2 more high school recruits. I'm going to say probably 3, because I think there'll be something else that pops up in addition to the 2 that we're all sort of expecting. And then, so that would put them up to, let's say 3. Let's say they get 18 high school recruits. They have Phil Dracovic. I would guess that they'll announce 2, 3, probably four, at least three. And then I'm going to add on one more because there's always something else. So probably four more transfers on top of Jurkovec. So you're looking at 18 high school kids, 5 transfers, that I think will get announced next Wednesday, that Pitt will announce. So you're looking at about 23 guys coming in. And I think, that group is going to bring you your starting quarterback, and probably at least 2 other starters and some freshmen who might have a chance to get on the field. It'll be interesting to see. I mean, they've recruited the defensive backfield really well. The secondary it's been a strength for this team. But, if you lose a couple of guys, if you lose Brandon Hill and Eric Hallett, your numbers are going to dip a little bit. So maybe there's an opportunity for a freshman to get on the field there. We'll see. But I think the 23 guys, if it's pretty much, I'm thinking about 21 of them that I'm pretty sure of already, of high school recruits and transfers. You add in 1 or 2 more guys, a high school kid and a transfer, it's a pretty solid group. I think it's a group that can help Pitt sort of maintain the floor and then, potentially raise that ceiling. Actually, tomorrow's Morning Pitt is going to be all about that topic. Well, it's going to be about a couple of different topics, but one of the big topics is about how Pitt has done recruiting high school kids. Just not just this year, but in the past few years. And, the short version, which I'm going to say this now, and then you'll watch the Morning Pitt video tomorrow morning, and you'll be like, why'd you have to spend this much time talking about it? You just said it last night in 4 minutes, or no, like 4 sentences. But the short version is, I think they've recruited well enough to lift the floor of the program. Now they need to recruit well enough to lift the ceiling. Crap, I seriously spent 25 minutes saying that on the Morning Pitt for tomorrow. I taped it this afternoon, or I taped it earlier this evening. And, okay, not all 25 minutes are saying that. There's actually other topics covered too. You know what? I'll give you a preview of the Morning Pitt. Tomorrow's Morning Pitt, Thursday's Morning Pitt. We're going to look at the 3 sort of elements of recruiting, the 3 wings of recruiting right now. Recruiting high school kids, recruiting transfers, and retaining your roster. We're going to talk about how Pitt has done in each of those areas. And that's what the Morning Pitt is about tomorrow. And I think it's an interesting conversation. I'll share my thoughts in the Morning Pitt, and then I'd like to hear actually what you think in the comments or on the message boards or on Twitter. I'm curious what everyone else's reaction is to those 3 areas of how they've done recruiting high school kids, how they've done recruiting transfers, and how they've done holding on to players from the current roster. So you have that to look forward to on the Thursday edition of the Morning Pitt. On Friday, we'll preview the official visit weekend, get you ready for everything going on as the countdown to signing day really kicks into high gear. It's inside of a week now. It's only going to keep getting closer and closer. Listen, while you're here, make sure you hit that like button and hit the subscribe so you can stay tuned into everything we do on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Turn on notifications so you can get alerts sent to your phone. Hope nobody... You didn't need to see anything that was on that phone. So you get all that sent to your phone, so you know when we go live, when we have a live stream. If we do it on our Wednesday night show at 8:30 on Wednesday nights, or if we go live after a game for a post game show, you don't have to worry about I forgot or what time is he doing that. Just get a notification. Click subscribe, turn on the notifications, you get an alert sent to your phone. And plus, you'll never miss any of our Morning Pitt videos, and who would want to do that? So thanks, everybody who tuned in tonight. Thanks, everybody who jumped in the chat screen. It's been a lot of fun. The comments and questions, it always is a good time. We will have one of these next Wednesday night, I think, right? Yeah, next Wednesday night. We will be live on signing day to talk about the recruiting class, so that'll be a fun one for sure. Make sure you tune in next Wednesday at 8:30. In the meantime, stay tuned to Panther-Lair.com for all the latest Pitt sports news, and we will... we'll talk to you again in the morning for the Morning Pitt on Panther-Lair, or what is this website called? youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Thanks, everybody, for following along. We appreciate it. We'll talk to you tomorrow.